Don't force anything. Let God guide you. Carl Jung. Human beings often hold a deep-seated belief that for life to progress smoothly and in the right direction, constant action and control over every detail are essential. We frequently find ourselves trying to cling tightly to relationships, to force specific career paths, or to meticulously shape our lives according to our own preconceived plans. However, the more one attempts to control every aspect of existence, the heavier and more burdensome everything begins to feel, as if life itself is subtly resisting these efforts. It is understood that underlying this powerful impulse is the ego, that part of the mind which perpetually craves certainty and safety. Yet beneath the ego's persistent demands, there lies a much deeper layer of the soul. This is a realm where intuition, the unconscious mind, and what many spiritual traditions refer to as divine guidance, quietly operate. When we endeavor to force life along a path dictated solely by our own will, we are often moving against this profound, deeper current. When this misalignment occurs, life often begins to send clear, unmistakable signals. Everything seems to slow down. The intrinsic energy within us gradually fades, and plans that once appeared solid and certain suddenly crumble or collapse. Such moments, seemingly like failures, are sometimes not failures at all. Instead, they can be life's way of compelling us to pause, to stop, so that we might finally attune ourselves to a deeper form of internal guidance. This exploration will delve into why, at times, the wisest course of action is not to redouble our efforts, but to release our grip, stop forcing things, and allow a higher wisdom to guide our journey. Understanding this perspective might lead you to view current events in your life in a profoundly different way. The illusion of having to do something when the ego mistakes action for safety. Most of us are raised with a very familiar and deeply ingrained belief. When a problem arises, we must immediately take action. If a relationship shows signs of strain, we try to talk more, explain more, or fix more. If a career path becomes uncertain, we rush to seek a new plan, a new objective, or a new strategy. Should a sense of anxiety emerge internally, our immediate response is often to fill that void with activity. In the mind's grasp, action is often equated with safety. Doing something, regardless of whether it's the right thing or not, still provides a fleeting sensation that we are in control of our own lives. From a psychological standpoint, this represents one of the deepest illusions humanity harbors. It has been clearly observed that people will go to great lengths, no matter how illogical, to avoid confronting the depths of their own inner being. This observation serves not only as a psychological insight, but also as a profound warning. Instead of pausing to genuinely listen to what is stirring within, the ego frequently opts for what appears to be the simpler path: more action, more control, and attempting to force life to conform to a specific direction. This creates a temporary sensation of being proactive and in charge. However, deep within, it is often merely a subtle mechanism to evade the deeper truths of the soul. Consider the experience of a highly energetic and driven individual. This person always had a plan for everything. If work became difficult, they would immediately set a new goal. If life felt slightly empty, they would sign up for a course, plan a trip, or start a new project. Their schedule was perpetually full. But once, during a very long conversation, this individual confided something they had never shared before. They admitted that sometimes they feared moments of emptiness. When there was nothing specific to do, they would experience a vague uneasiness, and to escape that feeling, they quickly sought out new activities. This story reflects a widespread human experience. We constantly engage in activities, not necessarily because they are truly needed, but because busyness offers a feeling of security. The ego mistakenly believes that if we cease our efforts, everything will collapse. Thus, it relentlessly pushes us to keep moving forward, to keep acting, and to keep striving for control. Yet life does not operate solely according to the ego's rigid logic. There are distinct periods when continuous action does not bring us closer to our true path. In fact, it might even lead us further astray. Envision the human soul as a deep, tranquil lake. When the surface of this water is constantly agitated and disturbed, we cannot possibly see its depths. The more we stir it, the murkier the water becomes. Only when the surface settles into stillness can we begin to discern what lies beneath. The human mind functions in a remarkably similar fashion. When we incessantly act out of anxiety, fear, or a desperate desire for control, we create chaos on the surface of our soul. In such a chaotic state, it becomes exceedingly difficult to perceive or hear the subtle, quiet signals emanating from within. It is believed that the human soul is far more than just a rational machine. Beneath our conscious awareness exists a deeper layer of the psyche, a sacred space that holds intuition, symbolic meaning, and a form of inherent wisdom that the ego cannot fully command or control. Many spiritual traditions refer to this deeper layer by various names. For many, it is also the place where they sense the quiet, guiding presence of a higher power, a profound form of direction that the ego cannot force or manipulate. When the ego rushes into action too swiftly, it frequently overlooks the crucial signals originating from this deeper layer. As a consequence, many individuals feel that despite their extensive efforts and numerous accomplishments in life, they still don't truly perceive themselves as moving in the right direction. They are busy, yet often feel empty inside. They keep pushing forward, yet remain unsure of their ultimate destination. The profound paradox emerges when people cease treating action as a protective shield. They begin to realize something entirely different. True safety does not emanate from controlling every aspect of life. Rather, it comes from the capacity to listen deeply to one's own inner self. When we no longer feel compelled to rush into action simply to appease the ego, we create the necessary space to genuinely recognize what is unfolding within our soul. The deeper meaning here is unequivocal. Life does not always demand more action. Sometimes the most crucial step is not to try harder, but to pause long enough to understand the underlying reason for our efforts. When people stop conflating action with security, they start to comprehend that calmness, attentive listening, and profound honesty with oneself are the true bedrock of wise decisions. From that newfound stillness, a deeper direction for life gradually begins to emerge, a path not imposed by the ego, but gently revealed by the quiet guidance of the soul. When the soul withdraws its energy, why everything suddenly stops flowing. When individuals begin to grasp that ceaseless action does not inherently bring clarity, they often encounter another significant experience, one that is quieter yet simultaneously more challenging to comprehend. This is the distinct moment when everything in life suddenly seems to lose its natural flow. Plans that once advanced smoothly begin to falter and slow down. Work becomes heavier and more arduous. Efforts that previously yielded results now appear ineffective or futile. Many describe this sensation as akin to attempting to row a boat on a river that has inexplicably run dry. You continue to row, you keep trying, but the boat remains stubbornly motionless. Consider the timeless analogy of a fisherman at sea. There are days when the fisherman sails out without catching a single fish. Others might think their luck has run out, but a wise fisherman does not panic or cast nets everywhere in desperation. They understand that the sea has its own rhythm. Some days the sea is full of fish, and some days it is completely silent. A fisherman cannot force the ocean to yield its bounty. What is notable is not the lack of fish, but how they respond to the silence of the sea. They do not try to resist it. They accept that sometimes the ocean needs its own time. The inner life of human beings operates according to a remarkably similar rhythm. There are distinct phases when everything flows naturally and effortlessly. You work and opportunities seem to materialize. You exert effort and results naturally follow. However, there are also phases when that intrinsic flow suddenly diminishes or slows down significantly. When this occurs, the ego frequently misinterprets the situation, believing that the solution lies in trying even harder. In a profound understanding of the human psyche, life is not solely governed by willpower or meticulously laid plans. Beneath conscious awareness exists a deeper center of the psyche, a core where intuition, profound meaning, and the true trajectory of each person's development are held. When we align ourselves more closely with this authentic path, energy often manifests spontaneously. We experience genuine interest, strong motivation, and an innate sense that we are moving in the correct direction. Conversely, when the ego attempts to force life towards a trajectory that is no longer suitable or aligned, the very first thing that typically dissipates is not opportunity, but our internal energy. One insight worth reflecting on is that where genuine connection and purpose rule, there is no need for a will to power. And where power predominates, that deeper connection is often lacking. This depletion of energy rarely happens abruptly. It begins very subtly, a slight fatigue, a gradual loss of enthusiasm, and an accumulating feeling that everything in life has become heavier than before, even if you are still engaging in the same activities. To grasp this more clearly, imagine attempting to cultivate a tree in unsuitable soil. You might water it more frequently, add more fertilizer, and tend to it with greater care, but the tree nonetheless grows weakly. This is not because your care is incorrect, but because the soil itself is fundamentally inappropriate for that particular tree. When the tree is transplanted to more suitable ground, it begins to flourish almost effortlessly. No forcing, no excessive exertion, simply the right environment. Human psychological energy functions in precisely the same manner. When you move in alignment with the true direction of your development, energy appears naturally. However, when you compel yourself along a path that no longer genuinely belongs to you, that vital energy gradually recedes and withdraws. What often confuses many individuals is that they mistakenly believe they need to exert more effort when, in fact, what is truly necessary is sometimes to simply stop. In contemporary life, many people experience this state without fully recognizing its profound implications. They work diligently, set numerous goals, and constantly push themselves forward. Yet internally, they feel exhausted and empty. This is not due to weakness, but because the current of their energy is being directed towards a path that no longer resonates with their authentic self. From a deeper psychological perspective, when the soul withdraws its energy, it does so not to inflict punishment. Instead, it acts as a preventative measure, stopping us from continuing further down a misguided path. If energy were to continually flow into that unsuitable direction, we might journey a great distance before realizing we had fundamentally lost our way. But when the energy withdraws, the ego is compelled to slow down and critically reevaluate its trajectory. For many, these periods of slowing down also become the moments when they begin to sense that a deeper form of wisdom is at play in life, something many spiritual traditions refer to as a higher power. This is not a force that compels life to conform to our desires, but rather a quiet, guiding presence that sometimes manifests precisely in the moments that force us to pause. Periods when life suddenly becomes slower often carry a profound underlying meaning. They serve as a silent internal signal, urging us to reconsider our current direction. When you cease forcing everything to continue as it was, you begin to perceive things you were previously unable to see, your genuine desires, your deeper values, and sometimes an entirely different, previously unseen path. Therefore, when you enter a phase in which everything appears to stop flowing, the appropriate response is not to panic or to relentlessly push yourself forward at all costs. What is truly needed is simply to slow down sufficiently to observe where your energy genuinely thrives and where it is subtly draining away. Sometimes that very act of listening will illuminate a direction that was previously invisible. When the signals are ignored, how the unconscious forces you to stop. The moment when the flow of life begins to decelerate rarely appears without precursors. Before everything truly grinds to a halt, life usually sends us a multitude of smaller, more subtle signals. The challenge, however, is that most people either fail to notice them or they perceive them, but consciously choose to disregard them. When these subtle signals go unheard or unheeded, the unconscious mind is often compelled to employ stronger, more insistent methods to make us pause. From a psychological perspective, the human psyche consistently strives to maintain a state of balance. When the ego pulls life too far away from its authentic, true path, the unconscious begins to send out signs. Initially, these signs are very gentle, a pervasive feeling of fatigue without a clear, discernible cause, a noticeable loss of interest in activities that once brought excitement, or a vague sense of discomfort whenever one contemplates a particular direction. However, because the ego perpetually seeks to maintain control, it typically rationalizes these signals in a very simplistic manner. I just need to try harder. It has been famously stated that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This implies that if we do not confront the uncomfortable signals emanating from our inner world, they will not simply vanish. On the contrary, they will gradually intensify and become more pronounced. Consider a poignant account shared by someone who observed, "I worked at my job for 8 years. For the past 2 years, every morning, I woke up feeling heavy. I thought I was just tired, so I tried to work even harder. But then my body began to react. I couldn't sleep. I had frequent headaches, and eventually I had to quit my job because of exhaustion. Looking back, I realized that I had known for a long time that the job was no longer right for me." This type of story is not at all uncommon. Many individuals experience similar signals without fully recognizing their true underlying meaning. From a deeper psychological view, such symptoms are sometimes not adversaries to be vanquished. Rather, they are a form of language from the unconscious. When the soul finds itself unable to communicate with the ego through intuition or gentle emotions, it is forced to resort to more potent signals. An accessible way to visualize this concept is to think about the dashboard of a car. When the engine encounters a problem, the car does not immediately cease functioning. First, a small warning light illuminates. If the driver notices it, they can stop the car and investigate the issue. But if the driver continues to ignore the signal and keeps driving as if nothing is amiss, the minor problem can escalate into a major failure that eventually forces the car to a complete stop. The human soul operates in a remarkably similar fashion. Initially, the signal might only be a subtle feeling of discomfort. Then, it may evolve into prolonged fatigue, and ultimately, it can manifest as larger crises such as burnout, a profound loss of direction, or unexpected disruptions that upend one's life. This occurs not because life intends to punish us, but because the unconscious is striving to compel the ego to pay attention. One of the significant insights gleaned from psychological exploration is that the unconscious consistently endeavors to guide a person back to the path of their true development. However, the ego has a tendency to cling steadfastly to what is familiar. It fears change, it fears relinquishing control, and it fears venturing into the unknown. This is precisely why it often disregards the early subtle signals from the soul. And when that happens, the unconscious must speak with greater urgency and volume. This explains why many individuals only truly undergo significant change after experiencing a major life event. This might be a crisis at work, the collapse of a relationship, or a profound period of exhaustion. When they reflect upon these events later, they frequently realize that the warning signs had been present long before. But because they were too engrossed or too fearful, they failed to listen. In numerous spiritual traditions, the moments that compel people to stop are sometimes interpreted as the means through which a higher power guides them back to their authentic path. This guidance is not delivered through explicit instructions, but through experiences that make it impossible to continue living in the old, unaligned way. What the ego perceives as a crisis may, in fact, sometimes be a profound and necessary correction orchestrated by life itself. From a deeper psychological standpoint, the symptoms of the soul are not always things that must be immediately suppressed or eliminated. Sometimes they are crucial messages. They convey that something fundamental in your life requires reconsideration, that a part of you is being overlooked or ignored. And if you persist in ignoring it, life will continue to find increasingly forceful ways to make you stop. The profound lesson here is not to live in constant anxiety over every uncomfortable sensation. The true lesson is to cultivate the ability to listen to the small, subtle signals before they escalate into loud, insistent knocks on the door. When you begin to notice the delicate feelings of your soul, the things that genuinely make you feel alive, and the things that slowly deplete your energy, you are cultivating an essential skill, the capacity to engage in a meaningful dialogue with your own unconscious mind. And when people learn to heed those signals earlier, they often don't need to await a major crisis to initiate change. Sometimes a simple, profound realization is sufficient to adjust the trajectory of life, not through the brute force of the ego, but through a deeper understanding of what the soul has been trying to communicate all along. The necessary collapse. When a higher power begins to dismantle the wrong path. After the subtle signals from the soul have been ignored for an extended period, life sometimes finds it necessary to orchestrate a more significant interruption. A job comes to an end, a relationship fractures and breaks apart, or a plan that once seemed absolutely certain suddenly collapses. To the ego, these moments often manifest as profound loss and overwhelming chaos. However, from a deeper psychological perspective, these collapses are not always acts of sheer destruction. Sometimes they represent a profound restructuring and reorientation of the soul. Human beings frequently believe that life ought to progress in a straight, predictable line, yet psychological life does not function like a perfectly executed blueprint. It has been observed that there is no true coming to consciousness without pain. This does not imply that individuals must actively seek suffering, but rather that genuine growth frequently emerges only after the ego's old illusions and attachments begin to disintegrate and collapse. An ancient symbol that vividly illustrates this transformative process is the story of the phoenix. In numerous cultures, the phoenix is not merely reborn. Before a new cycle of life can commence, it must first undergo a complete incineration. The fire consumes its old body until only ashes remain. Yet from those very ashes, a magnificent new bird emerges. For ancient peoples, this narrative was not a tragedy, but a potent symbol of profound transformation. Some stages of life can only conclude through total dissolution, making way for a new form to emerge. This profound idea is not confined solely to mythology. In modern science, many living systems develop in a similar cyclical fashion. In neuroscience, for instance, when a person alters their way of thinking or acquires new knowledge, the brain must reorganize its intricate neural connections. Old patterns gradually weaken, allowing new, more robust connections to form. From a scientific viewpoint, deep development rarely occurs without some form of dismantling of the old structure. Human psychological life operates according to this same fundamental principle. When the ego constructs a life based on beliefs or goals that no longer align with the deeper, authentic nature of the self, that very structure, sooner or later, begins to crack. A job that once provided a sense of success suddenly feels profoundly empty. A relationship that once stood at the center of one's existence becomes a continuous source of tension. A plan that was once completely trusted no longer carries the same intrinsic meaning. On the surface, these moments undeniably resemble failure. But if we delve deeper, they may be clear indications that a more profound aspect of life is adjusting our direction. This process is often described as part of the journey of becoming who you truly are. In that journey, the ego is not always a reliable guide. Sometimes it must release its cherished, old images of itself before it can truly perceive what it needs to become. An easy way to conceptualize this is to think about rebuilding a house. If the foundation of a building has begun to crack, merely repainting the walls will not resolve the underlying issue. Sooner or later, the entire structure will become precarious and dangerous. In such situations, the only viable way to construct something stronger and more enduring is to dismantle the old structure and commence anew from a solid foundation. From the perspective of the ego, this process often appears as sheer destruction. But from the perspective of profound development, it is an absolutely necessary preparation. And sometimes, when people reflect upon the entire process later, they begin to sense that this dismantling was not entirely random or accidental. It feels as though a higher power quietly guided their life by removing the paths that no longer served them, in order to reveal a deeper, more authentic direction that they could not previously perceive. It is precisely in those seemingly chaotic periods that many individuals begin to recognize truths they had never seen before. Their genuine values, their deeper aspirations, and sometimes an entirely different life path. Losing a job might lead them to discover more meaningful and fulfilling work. The dissolution of a relationship might compel them to understand themselves on a more profound level. The failure of a cherished plan might push them to live in greater alignment with what they truly believe. Collapse, therefore, is not invariably the end. Very often, it is simply the natural transition between two distinct stages of life. Just as a seed must break open before a sprout can emerge, some structures of life sometimes need to dissolve completely so that something new and vibrant can genuinely grow. Perhaps at some point in life, everyone has experienced a moment when an important part of their life suddenly crumbled. Yet sometimes those very moments become the genesis of an entirely new and unforeseen direction. Take a moment to recall a time when something significant in your life once broke apart, a job, a relationship, or a major plan. Sometimes sharing such a journey not only helps others realize they are not alone, but also helps you to perceive the deeper meaning and purpose of the path you have traversed. Synchronicity and timing. How a higher power speaks through circumstances. After an old path has collapsed and individuals are compelled to release the plans they once considered certain, life sometimes begins to unveil very subtle yet profound signs. These are not grand miracles or explicit, clear answers. Instead, they manifest as small, meaningful coincidences, as circumstances that arise precisely when they are most needed. An unexpected encounter, a piece of information overheard by chance, an opportunity that materializes just when every door seemed closed. In these moments, many people begin to feel that life is attempting to communicate something to them. This phenomenon is often described as meaningful coincidence, a term that signifies when two events occur simultaneously without a clear causal relationship, yet carry a profound and personal meaning for the individual experiencing them. It has been observed that meaningful coincidence is an ever-present reality for those who have the awareness to perceive it. It always exists in life, but only those who pay close attention can truly recognize its presence. Moments like these frequently appear in the most ordinary of situations. Have you ever thought intently about someone you hadn't contacted in a long time, and at that precise moment, your phone vibrated with a message from that very person? Or perhaps you were deeply contemplating an important life decision and suddenly overheard a sentence, a fragment of a conversation, or read a passage from a book that seemed to speak directly to the core of what you were pondering. If considered in isolation, these events might appear as mere random coincidences, but when they occur at pivotal moments in life, they begin to feel distinct, as if a deeper meaning is being subtly conveyed to you. Such coincidences are believed to reflect a profound connection between a person's inner world and the external events that unfold around them. When someone begins to undergo an internal transformation, when they release an old path, an old belief, or an old self-image, the surrounding world sometimes begins to subtly rearrange itself. Events that once seemed entirely unrelated start to connect, like disparate pieces of a puzzle slowly forming a larger, coherent picture. Imagine life as walking along a road shrouded in fog. You cannot perceive the entire path ahead, only a few steps in front of you. But each time you continue walking, the next segment of the road gradually appears. And often, when you look back after a long journey, you realize that the crucial turning points of your life materialized precisely at the moment you were ready to step into a new direction. Human life frequently unfolds in a similar fashion. When we view events solely through the narrow perspective of the ego, they appear scattered and difficult to comprehend. But when we reflect years later, we begin to notice that certain encounters, opportunities, and moments manifested in astonishingly interconnected ways. Experiences like these lead to a profound feeling that life does not operate entirely through randomness. There are moments when circumstances align perfectly, appearing at exactly the right time, as if a deeper intelligence is quietly adjusting our trajectory. For some, this is simply a matter of luck, but for others, it is perceived as the way a higher power guides human beings through the intricate circumstances of life. What is particularly remarkable is that this form of guidance rarely appears as explicit instructions. It does not explicitly tell you what to do. Instead, it manifests as a series of subtle signs. One door closes so that you cannot continue along the old, unaligned path. An opportunity emerges just as you are prepared to enter a new phase. A person enters your life and profoundly alters your perception of the world. From a deeper psychological perspective, moments like these frequently occur when individuals begin to live more authentically, closer to their deeper, true self. When the ego no longer attempts to control everything rigidly, people become more attuned and sensitive to the subtle signals of life. They begin to realize that life always possesses gentle ways of pointing toward a new direction. The crucial point here is not to obsessively seek meaning in every single coincidence. The important thing is to cultivate the ability to notice the truly meaningful moments. When you cease forcing everything to adhere to the rigid plans of the ego, you begin to understand that life always has subtle ways of guiding you forward. Sometimes that guidance arrives through an unexpected opportunity. Sometimes it comes through a seemingly random encounter, and sometimes it manifests through a small event that allows you to perceive your path in an entirely new light. The deeper significance of such moments is that they serve to remind human beings that life is not shaped solely by individual effort. There is another dimension of life, a deeper current that we cannot completely control. When people learn to listen to that profound dimension, they begin to realize that life sometimes communicates with us not through explicit words, but through circumstances that appear at precisely the right time. And when someone begins to comprehend this, their entire perception of life transforms. They no longer feel compelled to force everything into happening. Instead, they learn to walk with greater mindfulness and trust. Because sometimes what truly guides a person is not the absolute effort of the ego, but the astute ability to recognize when a higher power is opening a new door within the ordinary tapestry of life's circumstances. Inner peace, the final sign of divine guidance. It is at this juncture, after all the subtle signs, the meaningful coincidences, and the unexpected doors that appear in life, that people begin to realize something even more profound. The clearest indication that you are moving in the right direction does not always manifest in external circumstances. It is not necessarily success, public recognition, or immediately tangible results. The deepest, most authentic sign often appears in a much quieter, more internal space, the inner state of the soul itself. It has been wisely stated that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And when a person begins to move closer to that authentic self, a very subtle yet profound change typically emerges internally, a pervasive sense of peace they had never experienced before. In a therapeutic context, one might encounter someone in their early 30s. They might be neatly dressed, articulate, and hold a job that many would consider highly desirable. But upon deeper conversation, a hidden fatigue in their eyes becomes discernible. This individual might reveal that they have pursued their current path for nearly a decade. On paper, everything made logical sense and was highly valued by society. Yet internally, they always carried a quiet tension. What is truly remarkable is that when they began to speak about the activities they once genuinely loved, writing, studying human behavior, and engaging with others, their voice would slow, and in those moments, they seemed to connect with a very real, authentic part of themselves. From a psychological perspective, moments like these are exceptionally important because the human soul rarely communicates with us through explicit commands. Instead, it speaks through inner states. When a person deviates too far from their true path, the psyche often becomes tense, disordered, and drained of vital energy. But when they begin to move closer to what truly resonates with them, another distinct feeling gradually surfaces. This is not intense excitement, but rather a deep, abiding form of quietness and tranquility. An easy way to grasp this is to consider wearing a pair of shoes that fit perfectly. When the shoes are the wrong size, every step feels uncomfortable and irritating, even if you continue walking. But when the shoes truly fit, you hardly think about them anymore. You simply walk naturally and effortlessly. Inner life is similar. When you move away from your authentic path, there is always a subtle, underlying tension inside. But when you move in the right direction, a natural sense of peace begins to emerge. What is crucial to understand here is that inner peace does not imply that life becomes effortlessly easy. Our true paths can still encompass numerous challenges and uncertainties. However, the internal experience undergoes a complete transformation. Instead of feeling as if we must perpetually struggle against life, we begin to feel that we are moving in harmony with a deeper intrinsic current of it. Many people, upon reflecting on their lives over time, come to realize that the clearest indication they were on the right path was not external results. It was the profound internal change they experienced. They became calmer. They no longer felt the incessant need to constantly prove something to the world. A quiet, inherent stability began to manifest in the way they lived, the way they thought, and the way they made decisions. In this philosophy, this state frequently appears when a person begins to live in closer alignment with their deepest center, their true self. When the ego no longer attempts to control everything rigidly, a deeper inherent order of the soul begins to reveal itself. And within that tranquil state, people begin to feel that they are indeed moving in the right direction, even when the path ahead is still not entirely clear or fully defined. For many, this experience also carries a clear spiritual dimension. When people cease forcing life and begin listening to their soul, they feel as if a deeper wisdom is quietly guiding their journey. And in those peaceful moments, many perceive that a higher power is guiding them in the right direction, not through explicit instructions, but through the profound stillness that appears when they move closer to who they truly are. This leads to a very important realization. The deepest guidance in life rarely emanates from external noise or clamor. It originates from the profound ability to listen to your own inner state. When a path consistently makes you feel tense and disconnected from yourself, it is often a clear sign that the ego is forcing life in a particular direction. But when a choice brings an intrinsic calmness and clarity inside, even if it is still surrounded by external uncertainty, it is often an indication that you are moving closer to what truly belongs to you. Therefore, sometimes the ultimate sign of divine guidance is not a dramatic miracle or an unambiguous answer. It is simply the moment when your soul becomes quiet and settled, not because every problem has miraculously disappeared, but because a deep part of you finally senses that you are walking on the right, authentic path. Ultimately, there is a truth that many people only realize after numerous experiences. Life does not always need to be rigidly controlled by the will of the ego. The more we strive to meticulously arrange everything according to our own detailed plans, the more tense and agitated the mind often becomes. But when people slow down, release their grip, and stop resisting the natural inherent rhythm of life, a gentle clarity begins to emerge. And within that profound stillness, each person's true, authentic path gradually reveals itself. There are moments, people, and circumstances that enter our lives precisely when we need them most, not through an obvious, overt arrangement, but like a quiet, subtle guidance. And in those rare, precious moments of peace, many begin to understand a simple yet profound truth. Do not force everything. Allow a higher wisdom to guide you. Sometimes the great turning point of life does not come from forcefully making things happen, but from the moment you slow down, Listen more deeply and realize that your true path has always been there, waiting for you to trust it enough to follow it.